everyone. Welcome to the first in our Complete Streets Spotlight series. We're very happy to have Howard Weisberg with us today from the City of Meriden to talk about their Pratt Street Gateway project and share some of their Complete Streets efforts with us. Howard?
Okay, I'm going to attempt to share my screen and get the presentation rolling. Let's see how this works. Okay, is it showing?
It is.
Fantastic. Okay, as Mary mentioned, my name's Howard Weisberg. I'm the Director of Public Works for the City of Meriden. When this project started, I was the Associate City Engineer, and my goal was to design something that I was told to design. When the project was completed, I became the Director of Public Works, and now I'm responsible for maintaining what I designed. Which changes the presentation a little bit because we can now go into what to do and what not to do. As part of this, this is an hour-long presentation. I'm not sure how we can fill an hour, so I'm going to go through my slides. Anybody that has any questions at any point, throw it in the chat, and if it's relevant, Mary will interject and we can discuss things as they come up, and also obviously have a large discussion at the end. So what we'll do is we'll discuss the reason for the project, what we tried to do to meet some of these project requirements, and then really focus on the lessons learned, what worked and what didn't work. The project's been in place for a long time, so we have a fairly nice history of what we would do in the future and honestly what we would avoid as well. So we'll get started. First, this is the Pratt Street Gateway project. The Pratt Street in the City of Meriden is a 4,000 foot long minor arterial. ADT is not terribly high, it's 9,000. That was the 2030 projection. I think in 2012, it was around 8,000 anyway. Previous conditions was a 4-lane undivided 60-foot wide road. Average speeds 43 miles an hour. Your higher speeds were up in the 60 to 70 mile an hour range. After the road diet, became a 2-lane section with a landscape median, left turn pockets, and the average speeds of 35. And honestly, it's hard to go much higher than 42, 43 because, I've tried. We did a full accident study probably 10 to 15 years ago on safety. There was a fairly high accident rate on Pratt Street, factoring in some crash reduction factors, as you can see through all of these spreadsheets. We had a fairly significant accident reduction from 14 to 10 with these improvements, which were the left turn pockets, the landscape median, and the road diet. Crash data recently has actually shown that it's far better than that. So why build a Pratt Street Boulevard? What's the purpose of it? City of Meriden has been trying to figure out ways to connect the highway to its downtown for a number of years. The first mention of a Pratt Street streetscape that I could find was 2005 in something called the Meriden City Center Initiative. And if you can see my pointer, you can see that they have this lower part of Pratt Street right here, highlighted with trees next to an initial concept for the Meriden Green. In 2012, they had a master plan that shows this Pratt Street Gateway connecting the center of Meriden to the interstate. This is 691 right here, and this is Broad Street over here. Can everybody see my pointer? Mary, you can see the pointer, correct?
Yes.
Okay, good. So if I use this, that'll work. Yep. Excellent. This was a 2012 master plan concept, and they further refined Pratt Street into this boulevard with islands. And once again, this is a continuing progression of what the Meriden Green could eventually become, along with the rest of downtown. And they did a TOD, Transit-Oriented Development District, came into play in Meriden in 2013, where they broke downtown into a number of TOD districts, historical. This is our core downtown area on Colony and West Main. We have the park, which is the green, City Hall and the library and the Board of Ed are in the civic area. And this gateway is this area coming off Broad Street and the interstate. And Pratt Street is that main component. So Pratt Street has long been thought of as a key piece to connecting downtown Meriden, which is ripe for redevelopment, to the interstates on the outskirts of town. So a little bit more detailed. This is a current view of downtown Meriden. The highlighted purple area is Pratt Street. You can see in this corner, this is 691. This is the interchange off the highway at Broad Street. And you can see Pratt Street goes right into it and it takes you right to downtown. And then at the bottom end is, we call this the, I guess, vortex of doom. It's a one-way pattern across two Amtrak rail lines for the New Haven higher speed rail. We have some contraflow intersections over here. We're in the middle of doing a $3 million CMAQ renovation in this area to convert partial two-way and replace a lot of signals. But Pratt Street is a vital link to get from the interstate to everything downtown that has been built up recently and is going to be built up in the future. So a little bit more detail about what was done. This was Pratt Street in the beginning. Camp and Pratt intersect with Broad Street. And you can see there's this very confusing intersection over here with two islands. The main line isn't really the main line and goes to Camp Street. Motorists would get off the interstate, try to get to downtown and end up getting thrown off course by Camp Street. As part of our project, we realigned that to better define the boulevard and get people to where they want to go. Another key component of this project from a safety perspective was realigning an intersection at Pratt and Center. This used to have a signal, and you can see Pratt Street was that 60-foot wide 4-lane section. People would see the signal, fly down, not realize that the road was misaligned and result in some significant accidents. With our project, you can see the road diet conversion from 4 lanes up top to 2 lanes down below. It's now a all-way stop condition, but we've separated the turn lanes and actually done some work to realign the intersection as well. Some other key components of the project, of which I'll go into more detail as we go, were the creation of these islands all the way throughout. This is down at the south end. This area right here is actually our fire station. And we used to have these 2 stop bars to denote the fire station. We denoted them with flush islands in the new design. Something interesting to see here is the ultimate development of downtown Meriden. In this corner, in the lower right corner, was the old Meriden Mall. This was circa 1992, 93. In the upper slide, that's after the mall was demolished and it was essentially a vacant brownfield. And in the lower right corner, lower left corner is the current Meriden Green, which is an award-winning 13-acre flood control and urban park. And you can see all of these little traffic islands that we've put in. These little crossings, which we'll go into more detail, are diagonal pedestrian crossings, which have been highly successful for managing safe pedestrian crossing. What I want to do here is a little before and after via Google Street View on some of those areas that we just went through. This is that first slide when you're coming off the interstate and you're trying to figure out how do you stay on Pratt Street. This is what most motorists were faced with. They're coming down Pratt and they see this bizarre island configuration, not real good directionality. Many motorists went down there and got lost in Meriden. The new configuration obviously defines where you're supposed to go. We softened the curves significantly. We have a landscaped area over here that has some further growth. We did some retaining wall work to address the fact that we're sliding the road over. And it's a much more appropriate entrance off an interstate to a community. Moving down the road, this was that misaligned intersection. As you can see, broken sidewalks, 4-lane roadway. Everything's kind of just a mess here. There used to be a signal here. It didn't meet any of the warrants. We put up an always stop. Always stops on multi-lane roads are somewhat challenging. Once we went to this configuration on the bottom with the dedicated left turn bays, the multi-lane stop was a much easier configuration for motorists to figure out. And I think in the 3 years, we've had 2 pedestrian accidents only. We haven't had any vehicular accidents in this intersection in the 3 years since it's been open. And the pedestrian accidents were mostly pedestrians turning and minor conflicts with vehicles, but nothing significant. Up top, this is the intersection of Pratt Street and Mill. On the upper right, this was the former Meriden Mills, which has been redeveloped and is going to be continually redeveloped. This dirt pile is the Meriden Green under construction. But you can see this is a wide, vast urban arterial that really has no character to it going down Pratt Street. And this is a picture of it fairly recently. Our landscape medians, obviously the green and all of its growth. And you can see this additional development on the right in the bottom corner. And this is another view of Pratt Street. This is with the green still in, with the green being built. But you can see that Pratt Street is still a very uninviting corridor. As a pedestrian, trying to get from one side to the other is very challenging. By nature, motorists are going to try and find the fastest lane. People are going to be turning in this left turn lane. Motorists will swerve around, go into the right lane. We eliminated that entirely by making it one lane with left turn pockets. We made significant use of these flush medians, which I'll get into further. We realized during construction that raised medians were going to be a major impediment. So we developed a flush median concept based on a number of details we'd seen around the state and came up with something that we're actually very happy with. But you can see how much more inviting of a corridor this is. There's actually a pedestrian crossing right here. Once again, I don't believe we have any documented pedestrian accidents on Pratt Street since we've opened 3 years ago. So once again, going back into it, the project goals: improve safety by reducing conflict, reducing speeds through various traffic calming measures. Even though we try not to call them traffic calming measures, we just incorporate them into the road diet. Improving accessibility for pedestrians and bicycles. We'll get further into the bicycle compatibility portion of it. And the big one is obviously connect the interstate to downtown Meriden so people feel welcomed going into downtown and not like they're traveling through an area they don't want to travel into. The project was funded through LOTSIP. Our budget was $3.2 million. I believe we came in at 3.19 or something. Everything worked out really, really well through some creative work on the project to make sure we stayed under budget. The design group was BSC. Our contractor was La Rosa Construction, and the construction inspection and administration was done by VHB. An important part of this project, and I'm not going to get into it too much here, but I can take questions on it after, is we utilized construction management software. Appia, which is made by Infotech, Infotech created a site manager for DOT. We did an evaluation of a number of software packages to try and better manage DOT funded construction projects. Now, LOTSIP doesn't require the DOT 4 volume book, so this was ideal, but we still had to go through an audit process. And on LOTSIP, the audit process wasn't necessarily clear. So our goal was capture everything we can through construction management software, utilize this as a way to try and move that needle to get DOT to allow municipalities to allow construction management software to be utilized. It actually worked out really well. I'll get into that a little further as well. And definitely willing to take any questions and have conversation on the use of construction management software, because that was a huge component to this project. We went out to bid in 2017. Construction took a little over a year. It sucked the life out of me, as all construction projects typically do. We encountered a bunch of interesting things under Pratt Street when we finished that we weren't aware of, like partial trolley tracks, partial concrete pavement, partial voids in the pavement. And then obviously every business owner that we reached out to and coordinated had no idea that we reached out to them during design and complained about something or other. So there was a lot of movement during design and construction to make the project work. This is a typical section of Pratt Street. We have our landscape median. We have various plantings in there. We opted for wide outside travel lanes. We just didn't have enough width to get the landscape median with the protected turn lane the way we wanted to, while still having bike lanes and a wide enough parking lane. We felt it was necessary to go with an 8-foot wide parking lane because we wanted to avoid dooring of motorists. We opted for the wide outside travel lane / bike lane because we really didn't have the dedicated bike network yet. I'm not sure if that was the right decision or not, but it was a decision we made. You can also see in here, our left turn sections are actually a raised median. This was an early iteration of our concept design where we went with these raised left turn medians. Ultimately, we decided against that and went with a different option that we'll show later. But I know there was a lot of discussion internally about putting in a dedicated bike lane versus a travel lane. And ultimately, we decided to go with this wide outside travel lane, and definitely open for discussion on that later as well. Let's talk about some of the project features. The first one was this intersection realignment. As you can see, there's this really hard turn right here. I think it was rated for like 20 miles an hour. In snow, you could actually see the tracking, and the tracking was about 6 or 7 feet over. What we essentially did is we designed it for 30 miles an hour, and the tracking fit perfectly. In the snow, the tracking matches the lane lines. We have this landscaped area where we have space for a monument right here or some sort of sculpture. That hasn't materialized yet, but ultimately hope it will. I'll discuss this a little bit further when we discuss how do you maintain everything that you've built as part of these glorious projects. Here's some of the materials that we put in here. We went with European horn beams, which are actually very successful. We went with some other materials too. Some were successful, some not so much. But the goal was to come up with a strategy and a cohesive range of plants throughout the corridor. You can see here, we talk about local art opportunity. It just hasn't been materialized yet. But this does form a nice gateway. At least it lets people know that you're entering an area where there's attention being paid to the neighborhood. Okay, some more of the design features. This one was very interesting. In a downtown area and with people on their phones and people listening to headsets, we had concerns that there wouldn't be enough queues for pedestrians to safely cross the road. We had done some research, and in Europe, they've instituted these diagonal crosswalks. We had a ton of questions installing these, and every time we had a question, we would just tell somebody, walk across this. And what they would realize is the important thing is making sure that there's no direct path straight across, that the pedestrian has to actually face oncoming traffic inside the median. And what that does is, it forces them to pay attention. It forces the drivers to see pedestrians' faces. It's actually been far more successful than we thought. We thought people would bypass them. They actually haven't. So we have 3 of these in here. What we did realize is from a wheelchair perspective, we had to make them wider than we originally did. So the first one that we installed at the north end of the project was narrower. The second and third ones that we did, we actually spaced them out another foot to make sure that if there were wheelchairs in there at the same time, they'd be able to pass each other. That was a lesson learned. But yeah, these have been very successful parts of our project. So here's our typical median layout, median plantings. We opted not to go with just regular concrete or stamped asphalt or anything. We really wanted to get some landscaping in the corridor. Anything hardscaped tends to require maintenance, tends to collect garbage, has to be redone. And our goal was to obviously create a softer approach as well. So we had a number of things that we did there, including obviously granite curbing for stability. Concrete curbing chips, and ultimately it looks pretty poor. Granite curbing is a much longer lasting material. It does cost a lot more. We tried to minimize the maintenance to the greatest extent possible. We included our Parks Department in the discussion. And then significantly after, we also put in a paving border around all of the plants. There are a couple of reasons for that. The first is we've seen medians in other towns where the landscaping overtakes the curbing and goes into the road. Obviously, that starts to look messy. By putting a layer in there, it kept all of our plantings contained. It also created a safe walking surface for our Parks Department when they had to maintain it. And we actually utilized a pervious material. It's called a FlexiPave as this, and you'll see that in greater detail. But we essentially have a 2-foot border of FlexiPave around the entire landscape bed, which provides snow storage, pervious runoff, and a place to safely be while maintaining our plants.
Howard, we have
Yeah.
a question
Yeah, go ahead.
regarding those pedestrian refuges.
Mhm.
Mark Austin was asking whether or not you had any detractors by the blind, because the blind may have a hard time to tell where to go. Was it solved by the plate?
So that is an excellent question. The north end of our project, we actually have there's a group that works with people with disabilities, and they're in one of those parking lots. And one of their concerns was that, but by having the granite curbing, because we actually asked about that, by having the detectable warning strips, and all of our detectable warning strips that we used on the project were cast iron. So we didn't have to worry about wear as much. They continually provide high contrast, and they don't wear down. But from what we were told, the fact that we have those hard granite curb edges and it is a significant angle, it does help guide them safely around. Whether or not it's ideal or not, I can't tell you, but we haven't had any complaints since we've done it. But that was one of the concerns that was expressed. And, the thought process was that the higher granite curbing angling would help to guide them.
Thanks.
Okay. So some of the other enhancements that we made on this project from a safety improvement standpoint, obviously reducing conflicts through movement separation, getting rid of the 2 through lanes that had the ability to go through right or left on all movements, I think was huge. Movement separation is one of your highest crash reduction factors that you can utilize. Intersection realignments, the 2 intersections that realigned had a huge improvement. The medians, we closed down a couple of accesses. We restricted a number of accesses to right in, right out only, because we put medians in front of their driveways. And then we also utilized LED stop signs. These actually came in place before the project started. When we had a signal and the signal went down, we put in these LEDs. They did a very good job. So we continued to, we called for them at 2 separate intersections on this project. They're still functional. We like them because you're traveling for a significant distance before you hit a stop condition. So it does help reduce the accidental red light running at that intersection. We obviously went with compliant ramps, enhanced crosswalks, and then we also, to my contractor's dismay, installed these median alerts. They're retroreflective nosings. You can see them currently installed in concrete. In concrete, they go down pretty easily. It's fairly easy to drill into concrete and epoxy the anchors in. On granite, it uses an awful lot of drill bits. Contractor was not happy with us, but ultimately he managed to figure out how to put them in. They submitted 5 or 6 different iterations to try and secure them. We ultimately told him you have to actually anchor them to the granite. And he did, and they've stayed. That has made a huge improvement at night. These things glow at night. You don't see them at all during the day, but they've been a huge enhancement. Just segment by segment, just a very quick overview of the project. This is Pratt Street at East Main. We have a lane drop over here that goes into, we have 2 lanes that go into one. This is, like I said, a slightly earlier iteration. We had gone to these, a flush median in front of the fire station. And you can see a series of left turn pockets, right turn pockets, landscape medians throughout the corridor. Here's that little offset intersection at Pratt Street. And once again, continuing with this raised crosswalk. So this is a big parking lot for one of our factory large warehouse developments on the north side near Broad Street. They have a parking lot over here. Everybody cuts across and goes over here. One of the funny questions they asked was, well, how come you put the median not by our front door? And when I explained what I had to accomplish in terms of getting a left turn bay in there and needing to have a wide enough median for them to cross, they understood it. Sometimes crossings have to happen where crossings happen. I could have put the crossing by Myrtle Street, but then it wouldn't be a protected crossing. It was important for us to actually protect the crossing and minimize the crossing distance. And this has been very successful. But like, the challenge would be the mobility. And this was the one where when we did it, we realized that 2 wheelchairs couldn't pass. We decided not to tear it up and widen it. And instead, we just made the adjustments on the other one. But we have not had an occurrence where we've had 2 wheelchairs passing that we've been made aware of. So on those islands, I'll go back up, you can see that the original island configuration had a full height island all the way through. When we were looking at our materials, we had a couple of concerns. The first was truck turning radii and whether or not these islands would be catching trucks. Also aesthetics, a 3-foot wide median island with some sort of material in it just didn't seem appetizing to us. So halfway through design, we came up with this flush median idea where we would drop the nose down. Wherever we had a thin island for a turn pocket, we created a granite, essentially a flush granite paver island adjacent to our larger island. And you can see those in some of the videos. We actually modified our design in the field to have it just be on a full concrete base and grouted in. These are fairly substantial. They're 6x6 granite paver sets, well, actually 6x8 granite paver sets adjacent to granite curbing. And once again, we had a concrete base in a lot of places, so we bedded everything in concrete. They have held up phenomenally. This is an example of what it looks like. You can see actually, here's our little median alert. This is our flexible pavement. Here is our mulch, keeping all of the, and you can see how all the plants are maintained, nothing's growing over. There's a nice mulch surface, and instead of extending this island out full height, we went with this nice granite cobble look. Meriden's an older city. We actually wanted to make it look like these have always been here. The contractor did an absolutely phenomenal job on it. They've held up great, and they do a really good job of dividing traffic. We see people standing in them all the time. We had always had the option of eliminating these and making our lanes wider to get bike lanes, but then we would lose the ability to have these little separation/refuge areas. But you can see how this ties in. We're very happy with this detail. And now I'm just going to kind of go through Pratt Street, what it looks like in the final condition. You can see all of our islands, monument to signage. And this is an overview of what everything looks like from one of those factories. And you can just see how the turn pockets look. Everything's clean and neat. We actually had to create this pocket up here during construction because this company here decided not to tell us that this was a vital turning area. So we made some design changes on the fly. But once again, it's a fairly well-managed traffic flow. And, everything is clean and, actually looks fairly good so far. Here's a couple more pictures of it. This is that parking lot. This is the crossing. And here's a view all the way down Pratt Street. And once again, here's another view of that island. Little Rendezvous is a big pizza place in Meriden. It's some of the best pizza I've had. There was complaints that it was taking away their parking. What we didn't want is people trudging through our mulch area when they jaywalked across the street. So we just added more of this flexi pave material in there right where they would be. So you can park on both sides of the street and get to Little Rendezvous. And once again, here's another view with the green behind it. So that's it before I go into the lessons learned. Any questions on design, Mary?
No, not yet.
Excellent. So as I explained previously, when I started this project, I was a designer. Now I'm the director of public works, and I hear everybody's complaints about the project, mostly from a maintenance perspective. And since I designed it, obviously they yell at me. And since I'm the director of public works, I have to figure out a way to maintain it. Apparently my highway department wasn't fully informed of all of the program features during design. But what I want to do is discuss this from a maintenance, safety, economic development, and transportation corridor perspective. Before that, a little lesson learned on streetscape projects in general. 1992, Meriden had a huge revitalization program for downtown. Bump outs on two major roads with brick crosswalks, brick sidewalks. It was the huge boon that was going to bring Meriden to a different level. I spent the past 5 years removing all of those. This is what this looked like previously. You could see all these brick crosswalks. This was 2011, so this had already been in for 20 some odd years and was very tired looking. These brick crosswalks, whenever somebody had to do a patch on them, it was an asphalt patch. They weren't matching it. Obviously, the ramps weren't up to standard, but they also took a significant amount of parking and flexibility out of downtown Meriden. We ultimately removed the signal that was there, closed down Barrister's Court, made it more of a driveway, and actually it's now part of a sidewalk. We have since closed this road to through traffic, and we have a bunch of outdoor dining tables along Barrister's Court. I have not heard many complaints about people that were unable to use this triangular crosswalk. Nobody even realized that we removed the signal. That's how useless the signal was. Here's another example. They had this bump out that essentially took an entire parking lane adjacent to this little pocket park. Another bump out over here. You can see this brick crosswalk. We're in the middle of trying to get Meriden more accessible, but that also means more accessible for vehicles as well as pedestrians. We removed a lot of these bump outs so that we can have right turn movement, so that we can have left turn movement, so we can have two-way traffic in different places. Frankly, the brick crosswalks became a massive liability. They did a ladder back style on them, and every one of these ladder back pieces popped out, especially where it was shady. In the winter, ice would get in there. It would melt occasionally, but then refreeze and pop out. So we opted for normal sidewalk. We did a little demo on colored concrete over here. We could never get it the right red color. And it always ended up pinking. We've kept it. We're not getting rid of it until I'm told to, but we opted for full concrete instead. And you can see, once again, we have these neat cast iron detectable warning strips. This is what my highway department thought of my Pratt Street project. A little in-office graffiti. They were not happy about the fact that I took a 60-foot wide road that was really easy to plow and popped a bunch of islands on it. So in terms of maintenance, we have FlexiPave, we have the median alerts, we have those stop signs, we have the diagonal crosswalks, we have granite paver sets. The median alerts over 3 years have started to chip away. I think these are either my plow guys or cars occasionally going on top of them. I have a threshold for when I'm going to replace these. We haven't hit that yet. I think when I start to see damage on the fronts, we'll start to replace them. I only have this type of damage on maybe 3 out of the 20 locations, but this is something that you have to be cognizant of. Once these start not to become visible at night, we'll have to start looking at replacing them. These diagonal crosswalks, as the question alluded to, can the blind cross it successfully? The question is obviously, are they going to be able to hit this? One of the concerns I have with this is the accumulation of muck in here. So we're constantly reminding our highway guys, when you're sweeping, get out and, shovel whatever gathers in these little corners. That was one of the issues we had with the downtown bump outs. Garbage accumulates in every one of those corners. Actually, I may have a photo where I can show it. Yep, you can see right up here, this accumulation of garbage is anytime you have a curb that your sweeper really can't get to, you're going to have this garbage that's going to have to be maintained. Actually, another neat thing to point to is all of these fancy tree pits and tree grates, as soon as the trees grow, they lift them. So that's one of the reasons we got rid of all of those features and actually have a pervious material that we've put around our tree pits more recently.
Howard?
Yes.
There's another question regarding the median alerts, wondering whether or not there is a way to recess them into the curb.
With concrete, possibly, definitely not with granite. We actually had the contractor look at a bunch of different items. We couldn't find, instead of recessing, I guess with recessing, you're almost talking about like a detectable warning strip getting recessed into concrete. You can probably do it on a concrete curb. The challenge is really making it look good. Plows tend to go up against the curbing and they're going to scrape anything that they can, which is one of the reasons the median alert is set back like an inch. If it was flush, our plows would tear it off. I'm sure you could probably put some sort of little nosing adhesive on them. You can almost just get retroreflective tape and just epoxy them on. But I'd be worried about what your plows would do to them. But
Sure.
this particular material, you couldn't, I think it has to be drilled in.
Gotcha. Another question was, are you having any issue with asphalt patching with the cobbled granite, similar to what happened with the brick crosswalks? Have you
So
had to
that's
patch any yet?
Yeah, so that's an excellent question. I think we've only had one location where they had to go through the granite. But one of the reasons we use the granite paver sets is they can actually be taken out and reset. You have to chip away the mortar, but the challenge with any sort of proprietary product like a stamped asphalt or a stamped concrete is matching. It's almost impossible. The granite paver sets are they're a standard material. We have carboys of this stuff. We think we have, VHB can probably attest to how much we purchased during the project, but I know I have 3 barrels at our highway facility. So we have enough material that if a patch had to be done, we could get it reset and have it look like new. But we haven't had any issues in the flexi patch yet. Nobody's gone through any of the material in the median island.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, but apparently when that happens, evidently they can do a color match and let us match that color. So some of the maintenance issues that we've had on this, obviously it's now a high visibility corridor. It requires far more attention. I'm driving it all the time and constantly asking my highway guys to make sure the catch basins are clean or something's in the road. This is our gateway. It's now become a priority for sweeping and catch basin cleaning. Obviously, we talked about the debris and crosswalks. Winter operations went from straight plows or just a wing plow. They can run it and do the whole thing in an hour, to a wing plow that requires an additional plow on a pickup truck to get in certain areas. And it's a much more complicated plowing event. Every time it snows, my highway foreman gives me a call and tells me how much time he spent clearing snow off the Pratt Street project, and you know, telling me we should get rid of all of the islands. So I mean, they understand the benefit, but they also understand the maintenance issues. What we do in the winter is we'll actually put up little snow stakes at the median noses, just so our plow guys know exactly where they are if we're expecting a really heavy snow event. But definitely is a much higher maintenance issue. You know, would I still do it again? Yeah, absolutely. Would I let my highway guys know what to expect up front? Possibly. Yeah. So the landscaping, obviously there's a ton of landscaping on this project. The Flexi Pave has made it significantly easier for them to maintain. They don't have to stand out in the travel lane to trim bushes, to pull weeds. They've been very happy with the Flexi Pave. Was far more durable than even we expected. It was a challenge lining up during construction. And, you know, it took a while to find the right color, but we're extremely happy with the color, the material, the longevity of the product. It's been great. Something to think about is no matter what you plan for landscaping, and no matter what anybody agrees on, at some point, you're going to realize that a plant doesn't work, or you need to do something else. Plan for changes down the road. And hide some funds, you know, make sure that there's funds available so that if you have to replace a tree or you have to change out a grass because the grass just doesn't work, that you have money available to allow your parks department to make those changes. That was something we did. It helped with compliance. The happier my parks department is, the more willing they're going to be to participate in maintaining the Pratt Street Gateway. Safety. The three things for safety were the traffic speeds, the crash history, and are people actually utilizing it? And obviously the median alerts and the other materials all contributed to that. As discussed, you know, we haven't seen any noticeable crash history on the project. You know, there's not a lot of evidence of any debris. If people are getting into accidents and not reporting them. Like I said, there were a couple of pedestrian issues at one of the intersections, which were caused by people just turning and not paying attention. But in terms of crash history, we believe that the road diet has been a really effective use of maintaining it. Pedestrians have obviously been utilizing the crosswalks. So funding and project closeout, I touched on this briefly. This was a lots of funded project. The project is under external audit as of June of this year. It does take a while, but we were asked by the DOT if they could utilize the information from our project, which was from our computerized software, as a template for future LOTSIP projects. So that is promising. It allowed us to track all of the locations where everything was spent. Our consultant did a really good job on keeping up to speed on change orders and documenting the process and paying for invoices utilizing the software. So it created a really nice record of what we did. So whether or not it gets finalized and fully approved, you know, we'll find out shortly. But like I said, it allowed us to easily document what we're doing without having to go to the DOT 4 volumes method. From an economic development perspective, we have a number of major developments on either sides of this project, Meriden Green expansion, the Meriden Green, and some other developments. This is the Meriden Green if nobody's been there. This is a 13-acre brownfield redevelopment. This is essentially a flood control bowl. The entire purpose of this is flood control, and we essentially overlaid a park and other features on top of this. During our major rain events, this can fill up, and we've seen it fill up to essentially encompass this sidewalk on the left and the sidewalk on the right, especially with the recent events these past summer. We have an amphitheater. Here's a Pratt Street Gateway over here. The new train station is on the left. This is future development parcels that are included in this, and you can see the Pratt Street Gateway heading up there. And this is a future project where the Mills housing was, once again, right on Pratt Street. And we're going to turn it into more flood control with a sensory garden overlaid on top of this. Here's some of the development that has occurred in the area. This is, once again, Pratt Street is right along here. This is that new park that we were just discussing. And here is new building development over there. As far as a transportation corridor, we have a number of projects where Pratt Street is vital. Pratt Street is going to be we're going to be installing bike lanes on Pratt Street. And if anybody's been following, they're trying to get a Central Connecticut Loop Trail, which is a 70 or 80-mile loop trail around Central Connecticut. Pratt Street is this little orange area right here. So a bike lane on Pratt Street will be a vital link to getting a massive bike network installed in Central Connecticut. This is our current two-way traffic program that's going on downtown. Pratt Street will have some left turn movements. The rest of it is mostly conversions from one-way to two-way. But Pratt Street is a vital piece of improving the overall transportation network in downtown Meriden. And ultimately, we hope to cap this at its 691 entrance with a roundabout in the distant future. This is a great concept for how we can get people off the interstate into downtown as quickly as possible. That sums up what I have. Any questions, thoughts, discussions? I'm open.
Yes. First, there was a comment by one of our participants. I hear the term accident being used when describing cars hitting human bodies or other cars. Would we be willing to call them crashes?
We can absolutely call them crashes.
Thank you. And just a little plug for a www.crashnotaccident.com. It's just some information on the nationwide movement to change this language and to better reflect the harm caused by these impacts. And let's see, a couple of questions. How do you think the FlexiPave would hold up to snow clearing if it was used around tree wells in a sidewalk?
So FlexiPave has a couple of different materials. The rubberized one I'd have some concerns with, but they have a stone matrix pave as well. And we've actually used a similar product where it's essentially just an acrylic, where you mix it in with aggregate and it creates essentially a stone matrix. I would probably not want to utilize the rubber. Once again, it depends on what you're using. If you're using a snow thrower that, if you're making contact with the ground, I think the FlexiPave would have problems. But they do have purely stone-based options that would probably be more appropriate.
Gotcha. Okay. Oh, and a quick question for those who weren't following the chat was, what is the population of Meriden? And thank you, Regina, for answering that. We have 60,000. Are we right on, Howard?
Yep.
Fantastic. Any other questions? I'm scrolling through the chat here. If somebody has one, they'd like to just unmute and ask that question or share the comment. You're more than welcome to do so at this time. Just give people a chance. All right. I'm not seeing anything else come through in the chat. Howard, what question I have for you, as far as having designed the project and then having to deal with the maintenance and everything, what would you say is the best treatment or the best feature, most popular feature among
Honestly,
yourself and your department?
The landscape medians, despite what my highway guys think about them, I think has done a great job of obviously creating safe space for pedestrians, separating the traffic, providing some level of green infrastructure. It's really checked off all of the bases on what we were hoping to do. It's funny because when you actually go through it, you think it's going to be these massive landscaped islands. And when you go out, you're like, oh, there's really not as many as we thought. But that's not necessarily a bad thing. I think the thing is to implement enough of them and make them substantial enough that they do have an impact on the traffic calming. They've done just a great job, in my opinion, of making the project successful. Without them, we had said, well, what if we just turned it into a 3-lane section with the center turn lane instead of anything else? And I just don't think you would have had the same impact, because you have to visually reduce that lane to not 60 feet. And I think the median islands do a really good job of that.
Okay. Just a couple of comments. Excellent, Howard, from George Nowotny. Vincent Stetson from South Windsor. His comment was he really, great design. The medians in their gateway are an enormous maintenance task as well. So, I think that the treatments that you've used, the FlexiPave and things that you've done to improve safety of the maintenance crew, as well as reduce needs for maintenance, seem to be working really well for you. So that's great.
It would be interesting to see if there could be a retrofit too. It requires a small base of stone, but it does a really good job of, especially if your landscaping is starting to overgrow the median island, putting that FlexiPave border in there may not be a bad way to reduce some of that impact and still improve some safety too.
Yeah, good idea. Okay, all right. If there aren't any other questions coming through or discussion, looks like we're clear. So I want to thank you very much, Howard Weisberg. We really appreciate you taking the time to share your experience with us. Great project, and we're looking forward to learning more about how things progress with the green and the next phases of the development down there.
Great, thank you.
So thank you very much. Okay, thank you for your time, everyone. Hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Stay tuned for more information on our next webinar in the series.